active and respected member of the local community. She served many years on the local parish council, supporting a variety of local environment and social initiatives. You may remember some time ago, we did a joint course on beekeeping. And whereas she kept going, raised bees successfully produce honey, I dropped out, fearful that I would wreak havoc with my neighbours, unable to control swarms of angry bees. It was great fun to learn, but a world of difference between learning and doing. And I discovered as part of that process that you are a doer. Today, she's not going to talk about beekeeping, but her family's roots in the valley spanning 2 centuries. She's firstly going to take us on a ride through her family history, a long history in the Ullswater Valley. Then she's going to talk about her pioneering work with her husband in response to Storm Desmond in December 2015. It's an extraordinary success story, crowned with numerous awards and recognition in just 8 years, and it has only just started. So, without more ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Maddy to you, our speaker. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for everybody for coming. No, I think you expected about 10 people, so bear with me, it's a little bit in all. Thank you for coming though. I hope you haven't got high expectations, because it's kind of just going to roll and see how you get going, really. So, so when Tim asked me to do a talk, or us to do a talk, I wanted to be able to fetch in my family history, because it really, it predates, obviously, and is so important to what we're doing now in the valley and what we have done in the last, 10-ish years probably now. So I wanted to really put it in context of how my family have been in the valley for at least 200 years, probably a little bit longer. And I've been from the Lake District for a lot longer than that. So my family connections go back. Some go back to the Norman times, we think, with the Lowis name. So that first appeared in England after the Norman invasion. And that's a Lowis name is on my mother's side. So we have quite a strong connection here. I'll move on to the next slide, which will give you a little bit of a... So I had my DNA testing done this year. Dan got me a packet for my birthday, so we went for that. This is what came out. Scotland, which I was quite surprised at, 44%. But I think it was really more about that border region and like North Cumbria and the border region. But I do have walkers on my father's side who are reavers. So that's probably come from that as well, but a long time ago. So I kind of wanted to put this up just to show that how the Viking blood is still strong. And I think there was a survey done in about 2005 for Penrith, and it showed that Penrith and the area is the biggest concentration of people still with Viking DNA. So we're still here. We came and we're still here. So that was, and I put up the Indigenous part. It's debatable, isn't it, whether that word is right. I went to a talk a couple of years ago, and there was a farmer who farmed out in West Cumbria, and he could trace his roots back to 500 years in the valley. And he said we're probably the nearest to Indigenous people in the Lake District that you can get, mainly farming families because they stayed here, we're still here. Whether Indigenous was the right word or not, but he actually got called out quite badly for that. But I disagree with that. I think he was right, because I think you'd struggle to find a group of people that have been here longer within the Lake District than probably who still farm and live on the land. So whether Indigenous is the right, it's native definitely, but is Indigenous the right word? Don't know really, but I think you would struggle to find any other peoples that have been here as long as that. Hefted probably is the right word, isn't it, really? What we all know, and, you know, that's probably what we all are for being here. So yeah, I kind of wanted to point out that because I felt that we're really good at celebrating everyone who celebrated the Lake District. So we're really good at celebrating Wordsworth and all the painters and all the poets that write about it. But actually, the people that have made our landscape are these people, like my family, that have lived and worked here, who have been miners, who have farmed it, who've been quarrymen, who still work here. You know, the farmers' wives, the dairymaids, all those people made this landscape. And we don't celebrate, I don't think we celebrate them enough. And I think we should. And we're really good at celebrating other cultures in this country. I think, you know, the Scottish, the Gaelic, the Welsh, the Cornish, we don't do that as well here in Cumbria. We don't celebrate our history and our culture and our language as well, our dialect. It's really important. We're losing it. And I think it's something we really need to fetch to the fore now, because it is disappearing. And with that, I was going to read a little bit out of James's book, because James has given me permission to do this, but when I first read his book, and probably most of you have read this book, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I've never heard anybody write or talk about how it felt growing up here, but growing up here from a point of view of us who were from farming families, who lived here, who our families just worked here. You know, we weren't anything, we weren't writers, we weren't poets, we weren't painters, we were just people that worked here and lived here. And he describes being in an assembly at school, secondary school, same secondary school that I went to, being talked about, you know, how wonderful the Lake District is, and all these great people that have, you know, been here and written about it and everything else, but actually feeling just like it means kind of doesn't mean that to me at all. So I'm just going to read this, if that's all right. So the Lake District, in her monologue, was the playground for an itinerant band of climbers, poets, walkers and daydreamers, people whom, unlike our parents or us, had really done something. Occasionally she would utter a name in a reverential tone and look in vain for us to respond with interest. One of the names was Alfred Wainwright, another was Chris Bonington, and she kept going on and on about someone called Wordsworth. I'd never heard any of them. I don't think anyone in that hall who wasn't a teacher had. Sitting in that assembly was the first time I'd encountered this basically romantic way of looking at our landscape. I realised then with some shock that the landscape we loved, where we had belonged for centuries, the place known as the Lake District, had a claim to ownership submitted by other people based on principles I barely understood. And that was kind of how I'm sure it still is for a lot of people growing up here, but I think it's really important to differentiate between what it's like to have that big part of that history and landscape and growing up here compared to what maybe other people see us as. So, yeah. So that's for the little bit of history for that bit. So this is the map of all the places in the valley and locally going over to Bampton, Shap, where my family have lived and are from in the last 200 years, well, earlier as well. So the earliest, the earliest records we've got is from a Richard Lowis at Hardendale, and he was actually born there in 1694. He was born at actually at a place called Sleddle, which is now flooded under Wet Sleddle, so the house is gone. So he was born there. So that's the oldest records that we have. Like I say, I think we could go back earlier than that. And the other place is High Winder at the top. We have records there of our family being born there in the late 1700s as well. So, yeah, haven't gone very far. It doesn't seem like, but obviously that's how it was in those days. People travelled not very far. They lived there, they worked there. That was what they did. So I'll go back to, again, it's on my maternal side, my mum's side, but going way back to this time when Greenside Mine was setting up, The first people that came to the valley of our family were Watsons, and they came from Reeth in Yorkshire, the big lead mining area. And they went to Alston, I presume, to work. Thomas Watson married his wife Mary, who was from Alston, and then they came to Glenridge between 1832 and 1836, not sure when, so we've got exact records. But their second child was born here in 1836, so we know that they came here between children. I put in about the lead, so I'm sure we all know a lot about the mines. I'm no expert, absolutely no expert on the mines at all. I've just done the research that I've done because of my family history. I had no idea that when we moved to Glenriddin, I had no idea that my family had actually lived here and came here in the 1830s. Just had no idea until I started looking into my family history. But I think the connection there is that the smelter that was built in Nented in 1825 meant that obviously the lead ore from here was going there because it was better at extracting the silver. And so I think obviously the connection there, and the miners will probably then start coming here to work because they realised Greenside was booming. So it was, yeah, so that, and there was a big influx obviously of population at that time for Glenriddin, as we know, lots of places built. Yeah. So the next slide is where we lived, which was Glencoyne Cottages, which is now seldom seen. So it was called Glencoyne Cottages back then. Not sure when it changed name. It's probably a Victorian, Edwardian thing, I would think. And we lived at number 1, which is the first cottage there. It's got an extension on now, but obviously it didn't. And this is a row of 10 cottages, and they're like 2 up, 2 down. They're still like that now, very small. And they were built for the miners. I think about 1838, but it might have been about 1836. So I think my family, the Watsons, were the first ones to live in number 1 when they were built. I've got the censuses on there, so that's the 1841 census and the 1851 census. Yeah, I lived there for at least 15 years and had 7 children in there, and a lodger at one point as well, who was a clogger. So it would be pretty cramped, wouldn't it? But they had a school there at the time. In 1851, there was 23 children living in those cottages. So they built a school for them. And from there, I'm not sure if people know where it is, but it's sort of out of the village and turn left up the valley. And the miners would have walked over the top to get to the top of the mine, probably up the track. Be quicker than coming round all the way around here. So it was a lot easier for them going around there. And I think there's only 1 of these cottages lived in now. I think they're all holiday cottages or second homes. But it looked very nice. Not sure what it would have been like in 1841 now, sorry. And then from there, we went to Rushmire in Matterdale. So Rushmire is a farm upon the Troutbeck Road as you go out from Dockery up towards Troutbeck. So it's on the side of the road there. And I've been informed recently that it's locals actually call it Cobble Hall. But probably because it's pretty rough, I don't know, cobbled together off stones off the fell, I would think. And we were there, yeah, so let's say, so that was from the 1861 census. Full family were living there, so Thomas and his wife Mary, all the sons and the daughters. But the sons were still lead miners. They were farming now at Rushmire, so Thomas was a farmer, and he only had 18 acres at the time. But at that time, the common land behind wouldn't have been enclosed, so I think they would have still had stints on the common land, so they would have farmed on the common as well. Not sure whether they owned the place or whether they were just tenants. I don't know. We've got that detail. So from that time in 1861, my great grandma was working as a dairymaid at Ullswater Valley. So she was working as a dairymaid there, and she had a son out of wedlock in 1863 at Rushmire. He was born at Rushmire. And and he was William Watson, so that's my great-great-granddad. He was born there. And by 1871, they'd moved to a larger farm in Dockwray. Not sure exactly where, because on the census it doesn't always name the places, it just gives you a number or something. So just working out from names of other buildings, I've worked out, I think it's probably above the farms, above the Royal in Dockwray. So it's one of those farms up there. And they went there to farm a larger farm. Firstly, it was 66 acres, and then by 1881 they were farming 80 acres. So I think it was a reflection really of the time. Mining was booming. The population of Maddy Teasdale was 490 at the time in 1871. So huge boom, but mainly through mining, people income into miners. But as farming was booming as well, because obviously the Industrial Revolution and the demand for wool and meat and dairy products. So that enabled people to farm, and it made it probably very profitable to be farming at that time. And obviously I think, you know, you'd want to, if you've mined for a few years, you'd probably be pretty pleased to get out of mining and start farming, even though it's not a very easy occupation either, but I think it would probably be preferable than mining. Yeah, and I think the trains, I think it was 1864, the train came to Keswick from between Penrith and Keswick. So again, that would have a huge impact on what farmers were able to trade and the auctions, and just opening up a lot of opportunities, I think. So I think it was a bit of a boom time for here, mining and for agriculture as well. Yeah, so then we went from Rushmire to Martindale. So the mid-1880s, not sure exactly when. Thomas and Mary had died by now, so they were buried in Martindale Church. That was like the head of the family. So now it was the brothers that came to farm at Dalehead, which is at the head of Martindale. Yeah, they again don't know whether, I presume they were tenants because it's still a tenanted farm. It did belong to Lowther, but now it belongs to Dale Main. So I presume they were tenants, and they went there. When they first moved in 1891, two of the brothers are still down as lead ore miners. So they were obviously travelling or staying through the week here and then going back to the farm. But they were still mining. But I think the mine was sort of quietening down a bit then. But they were getting older. They were in the 40s and the 50s by then. It must have been pretty hard, I think, to keep up that lifestyle. Yeah, they were there for quite a while. John died in 1897. He was the eldest son, and he died at Dalehead in 1897, and he's buried in the old church alongside his brother Thomas as well. William Watson, who was my great-great-granddad at this time, was working on the farm there. So his mum was she was like obviously housekeeper to them all, and he was working on the farm. But in 1891, he'd actually married a lady called Annie Martin, and she was from Knight Hall in Bampton. So I don't know how they met, who knows, but she was from, her family farmed at Knight Hall in Bampton, and they got married at the time. And then my great grandma was born in 1891 at Wintercrag, which is, I don't think I've got a picture of Wintercrag actually. Yeah, Wintercrag is next to the old church. It's the farm next to the old church. So she was born there, and they went on to live, that family, William Watson and Elizabeth and his wife and 3 other children went on to live at Beckside, which is at Sanick. So they went down to farm there. But sadly, Annie died in 1895. So she died 6 days after childbirth. So her new baby died as well, just a couple of days after she died. but she had 3 young children, all under the age of 5. So she left those behind, and she's buried in the churchyard as well. But there's a gravestone that has a plaque that's missing. I don't know if it's hers. I like to think, and one day I'll try and find out from burial records whether that's her in there, because there's records of her being buried there, but I can't find the grave. And I think, but it's next to where her uncles would be, so I think it's there. So and again, we never knew any of this. We didn't know anything that people in Martindale. I later went on to farm in Martindale. I had no idea that these people were buried in the churchyard. So this next picture, this is my favourite picture of our family, because it records the eldest members of the family. So so the lady, yeah, you're right, is, we think, Mary Proudfoot. So she was a servant. She was on the 1901 census with them, so I'm presuming it's her. The lady sat down is Elizabeth Watson, who was born at Glencoyne Cottages in 1841. So by this time she is 68. So she looks quite old, doesn't she? She's got a cat on her knee. There's a dog there, which I don't know is a hound of some sort, and it looks like it's got a certificate around its neck. So I'm not sure where they've been. They look nicely dressed. There might have been a show. I think the photo's taken about 1909. And then there's Lizzie Watson, so that's my great grandma, who was born at Wintercrag, and then that's William Watson, who was born at Rushmile. So it's sort of 4 generations, well, yeah, 3 generations of my family, but thinking that that's someone who was born in 1841 sort of blows my mind a little bit. But that's a picture of her, which is brilliant. Now they moved about now down to Waterside, so I don't know whether this picture was taken for that purpose. They left Beckside and they actually moved down to Waterside at Pooley Bridge in 1910. So Waterside is, I don't know, most people will know where that is, but it's Waterside campsite down on the Pooley Bridge side now. So they moved there in 1910. So coming on to the Lowes side, because now when they moved down to Waterside, Lizzie was at some point was courting a Richard Lowes. Now he lived at the time at Rosgill Hall, so he was coming over the fell to court her. That's what we've been told, isn't it? That he used to come over on a horse to court her from Rosgill. So he'd come over the fell to see him, which is lovely. And so this is a picture of so Richard Lowes on there is on, that's in there. So that was the man. I think this was about 1910. So he was the one who would ride over. So that was the connection with that, with the Lowes family coming over to Waterside. Though they got married in 1913, they actually farmed at Keld and didn't come back to Waterside until 1924. But my great-great-granddad, William Watson, was still farming Waterside up until then. And also on this picture is the lady in black, basically, you can see. So that's Annie Mawson. And Annie Mawson was born in Mardale. Not the date, sorry, somewhere. Yeah, Annie Mawson, born in 1850 in Mardale. So we know that, they found a Goosemire in Mardale. So it's hard to, I've made the map a bit bigger really, but the Goosemire is here, which is here. Dunbull is there, which is there. So now we know that Ullswater obviously basically runs all the way round here. So it's lost to the Ullswater. And the bottom picture is another picture of Goosemire from the back. So her family, her father has actually been there. Her father and her grandfather were both born in Mardale as well. My father was born in 1793, and his father was born before that as well in Mardale. So she has a long line of being from Mardale, probably different farms, but we know that they were at Goosemire. And when you go along the road now, along to Ullswater to the car park, Goosemire is just below, so where the old Corpse Road comes down from Swindale. And Goosemire is the farm that you can actually still see some of the walls. And obviously when the lake's really low, you can see some of it. But that's the farm that she was from. Again, didn't have a clue, but really nice to find out. So she went on from there. So the next slide is the Lowis family at Waterside. So our family's still there, still farm it. The couple stood outside the door. It was Lizzie and Richard Lowis, obviously in their later days. Richard died in 1954, but Lizzie didn't die until 1973, I think it was. So she had a really good old age. And then at that farm there, seeing a lots of changes. I mean, obviously she lived there through the wars. They started the camp. She started the campsite. Their family, you know, they had 6 children altogether. From there, so you know, a hard life, but actually another time when things were changing. Tourism was becoming much more popular, and it's obviously what we see as today at Waterside. The other top picture, so that's my grand and granddad in the middle. So that's another Richard Lowis, and Emily was Brown, but Lowis at their wedding in 1945. And then the picture below is my great auntie Evelyn getting married to James Mitten. Now James was a captain in the army, and there was an army training camp in Martindale, and so she met him when the training camp was in Martindale. They used to train up there. It was up towards, based up for near the where the bungalow is. It's on that track. It was on there. It was, but they also used to train on Askham Fell. So a lot of the ditches and a lot of the hollows that you see are all natural. They're man-made as well, because they used to train. They actually used to fire live rounds up there, didn't they? And tank training on the fell. So yeah. So they've lived through a lot of different at Waterside, but still there. And so Annie Brown, just who was my grandma, so she was born at High Winder, which is on the Cellaran Road between Poolbridge and Askham. So there's Winder Hall, which is allow the properties, and High Winder is right up on against the fell. You can't really see much off the road, but you can see it from the fell as you come in the other side. And like I say, they've been there since at least 1776, the Browns. Maybe earlier, but we haven't got the records for that. And that's a picture of Hugh Brown. He was born in 1853 there, and he died there in 1931. He married quite a colourful character, I would think. He married a lady and was married for about 26 years. They didn't have children. And then when he was 6, she died. And the year after, when he was 62, he married that lovely lady, Mary Louisa. And they went on to have 4 children quite quickly, as in like a month after they got married. So, and then 3 others after that. So yeah, and then he died in 1931. But he was I think he was a very astute businessman. He had that farm. They owned High Winder, but they rented a lot of land off Lowther around the farm. And he worked for Lowther Estates. We're not sure really what, but looking at how he's dressed, we're thinking that he probably did like vermin control, hunting, that kind of thing. His dogs look like whippets or lurchers of some sort. So we think that's what he did as well. And he obviously thought a lot about his children. He bought them all a house and left his son the farm. So going forward, he wanted the family fortunes to carry on, and he was obviously forward thinking for that time, I would think. And Mary Louisa died in 1939, and it left the 4 children to run the farm. So obviously the war was breaking out then. So the 4 children carried on running the farm just themselves, but they had help from prisoners of war. There was a prisoner of war camp at Shap, and they got drafted in to help them on the farm. And so that's how they got through the farm. And you can understand why they waited till 1945, obviously, to get married and then dispersed, really, with the war effort going on. So I think that's kind of a quick overview, really, of the family in 200 years or more of the family. But you can, you know, from us, I mean, obviously, you understand a lot of this, and we know, obviously, we have our family members still around. But it's really, it's just, it makes me very proud of them to think what they've gone through and how they've lived, and that we're still here, and that, you know, that we've been a massive part of what this landscape looks like and what's gone on here from a community point of view, but, you know, especially from a, you know, from an economic point of view, the farming, the mining, you know, it's been a big, they've had a big input into the area, but so have hundreds of other families, obviously. But I just think it's quite interesting. They're a snapshot, really, of that time, aren't they? Of what many farmers in the Lake District would be doing, working, mining, quarrying, farming, bits of everything, really. So I think they're, yeah, I think they're a good example. So from my point of view, after that, so at school, I always loved being on the farm, just wanted to be on the farm all the time, weekends, holidays, just wanted to be on the farm. As I got a bit older, I got more interested in nature and landscape, really. And when I was at secondary school, I started volunteering with the national park. They used to do, I don't think they do it anymore, but they used to do it one Sunday a month for 15 and under, and you could go and volunteer. And I used to do that. So that was kind of what I wanted to do. And I used to say, I want to work on the land. Like, I want to be a farm manager. Or I want to be a ranger. And the careers advice teacher just said, that's not a career. Like, just don't bother. Go to university, and you can do that sort of stuff in your spare time when you're volunteering. And I was like, you know, and going back to like what James has written about his book, for me, that was not an option. You know, for me, I wanted to be on the land, part of the land. I wanted to be working where I'd grown up, and I just working where I loved. So that was an option. And luckily, the National Trust careership training scheme came along just as I was leaving school, which was great. And I managed to get a post. It was an apprenticeship basically, but I got a post in Borrowdale working with the National Trust teams. And then at that time they had warden team, they had a forestry team, they had a footpath team, they had an estate maintenance team. There was a lot of staff on the ground. So you got an experience of everything. And at the time, so I was told I was the only female actual practical worker in the Lake District. There was like land managers and there was admin staff, but they'd never employed a female. So this is 1992. Never employed a female to work on the ground in a practical sense. So no pressure. But no, it was great. 3 years of doing that and going to college. It was a diploma, so we did college in Devon. There was 12 of us in the whole country doing it, and 7 of us finished it, and 4 of us were girls that finished it. So yeah. So after that, I went and did a bit of travelling, went to New Zealand, worked on farms and pony tracking, came back and met my previous partner, and we were farming in Bordale. So this is Bordale Valley in Martindale, and that's Housty Brow Farm in the bottom. And that was the main farm, but we actually lived at Bordale House, which is at the other end of the valley, so we were living up there, but the whole farm was the valley, so we lived up there and farmed up there. And like I say, I had no idea about any of my Martindale history at that point. I think we just didn't know anything about it at all. So to, you know, obviously the pool was there, but I didn't understand why. And then we moved up to Scotland to farm. And that really was where that ended for me. But then we were able to come back to the conservation side as years went by. We dabbled a little bit, me and Dan now, I'm talking about me and Dan, dabbled with doing work on family farm, and just our interest was obviously conservation and farming again, but we didn't have the opportunity to do it for ourselves, so we were having to try and do it where we could really. So from there, it was the start of Ullswater catchment management. Just have a little drink. Are we all right for time?
Always okay.
Probably gone too fast, actually. Yeah. So that's what we do, combining nature recovery and natural flood management into working farms. Always been the aim of us is to make sure that it works for farming. That was always the plan. And it started, so how it began, yeah, like I've just told you, with hundreds of years of history through farming and living in this area. Dan's family's from Brelcold area and Penruddock area as well. Again, been around for couple of hundreds of years. So some of the work started. That's Dan's family farm, and that's some of the first work he did with the Rivers Trust to fence off the beck there. And just within 6 years, the difference you can see, obviously, massive benefits for the habitats and biodiversity there. And it was just like this could happen on lots of places, lots of farms. It's not taking a lot out of your grazing. This could happen on most farms. It wasn't like we were trying to take acres out of production or anything like that. So it was a really good example of what can be done without affecting your farm production. So Storm Desmond was the catalyst for us to get on really and form something more formal. We all remember that, I'm sure, and all don't want to remember it really, but it was yeah. So it obviously damaged everything, didn't it? Really, we had it affected what physically happened in the valley, and it affected the community as well. I think it changed everything really. But from a point of view of for what we were doing and what wanted to do, we were quite clear that, you know, building a wall, you could only build it so high. It would have to do other stuff upstream to stop this happening. Obviously, we need to, you know, manage rivers at pinch points and things like that. But we knew really the evidence was showing that we were going to have to start dealing with water upstream rather than just build big walls that cost millions of pounds, and then, you know, ultimately we might have another Desmond and it doesn't work. So we needed to look after that. So we worked with the flood action group in the village, which was brilliant. Everyone was brilliant. Everyone was really proactive. And we started with sort of small scale tree planting projects. I think the year after this, reopened one of the channels further upstream that when the river was cleaned out after Desmond, the diggers just went up the river and just kind of did that and just pushed everything to the side to make a clear channel. But it blocked off a lot of the incoming channels that actually hold some of the water and the gravels back. So there's a big one, I've got a picture of it, but yeah, there's a big one as you go up Greenside. And it was blocked off basically. So that was one of the first things to try and open that up so it alleviates the flow of water through, holds the stone back and holds the gravel back. And that was one of the first jobs on a river, I think, that we did. So going forward, it became, well, yeah, we both had like 2 jobs at the time, and we were doing that voluntary, and it just got to a point where it wasn't possible, and there was so much work, people wanting work done, so it became something had to give really. And Dan left his job in COVID and went full time to run it. We became incorporated in 2018, but that was still like a part-time. The CIC was incorporated, but it was still part-time for us. And then in 2020, Dan left his work and made it his full-time work, and then I left my work in 2021, and it's now our full-time work. But it needed to be because we couldn't do everything. So we've always said, let's say, farmer-led projects. So farmers come to us, land managers come to us with their ideas, and that was always how we wanted it to be, so that they tell us what they would like on their farm, and we try and make it happen. Like I said, 70% of the land in the UK is farmed, so to be able to actually meet the nature recovery that we have to meet, not just targets, but what we all know we need to do to mitigate climate change and just to improve our biodiversity, we're going to have to work on farms and with farmers. You know, there is pockets of land that are rewilded, nature reserve, whatever you want to call them, and that's fine. That's fine in their areas, but that doesn't connect on a landscape scale. It doesn't connect. So what we've always trying to do is to think about where we connect, and so it appears. So you've got wildlife corridors, you've got just more interconnected places for a wider range of. You're not isolating pockets of wildlife or biodiversity, you're actually helping them spread out. And by working on individual farms, doing a little bit on everything is, in our mind, the way to move forward and to actually get that into the landscape, rather than just having small pockets of nature reserves or wildlife or rewilding areas. So the hedgerows are a big part of our work, always have been. It's 1950s, we've lost a lot of hedgerows. Obviously, farming became much more intensive after the war. Amazing habitat, really good for everything, habitat, but also amazing for farms because, well, you get a good fence, but you also get good shelter, and the shelter that it provides, and also the fodder that it can provide for livestock, for cows grazing once they're grown. And there's actually quite a lot of evidence now to show that having hedgerows improves your soil health, which is near, you know, from going out from your hedgerow, the soil health can be much richer, much better. And we've just lost a lot of them, and you can't, you know, yes, farmers have obviously pulled them out, but the farmers pulled them out because they were paid to do that. Market forces were forcing them to do that. We don't know. I mean, we have never had a problem with farmers having a hedge. They love it. You know, they love to see the wildlife. So it's an easy win. We just see it as a very easy win. And it will, rather than taking productive land out of production, you can plant thousands and hundreds of thousands of trees in hedges, and you don't need to change how we produce food in the fields. So this is a map that we had done last year. I don't know how it looks on there. That's not too bad. Sort of the upper catchment really, but the blue areas are hedges we've put in. It's actually out of date because we've put more than this in now. Find how many we've put in. So the blue areas are the ones that we've put in. Green areas, hedgerows that are already there. Orange is a line of trees or a quite an obvious previous hedgerow. So maybe an old pest that you can see that's been a hedgerow. And the yellow is poor condition hedgerow. That's the little dotty bits that you can see. So that's poor condition hedgerows. But really what we wanted to show was the potential of how we could, if we restored these hedgerows that have previously been hedgerows, or the poor condition ones. I mean, look how different that map would look if it was all in blue, but it's an easy thing to do. It's not an easy physical thing to do, but you know what I mean? It's an easy project to get trees back into the landscape. And obviously visually, it's wonderful, isn't it, for the landscape as well? But from a farming point of view, we just think they're just, you know, you can't go wrong with them really. In the right place, obviously, but if you followed the old lines, then you wouldn't be changing anything anyway. You'd be really adding to it. And the payments now, so the basic payment scheme for farmers is phasing out, so it'll be gone by 2027. There's new environment land management schemes coming in on board all the time. The main ones are Sustainable Farming Initiative and the Countryside Stewardship. So that's been around for quite a while, but the payment rates, the people are actually, DEFRA and whoever, governments, subsequent governments are realising that, paying farmers well to actually help put this nature recovery back in is much more productive in the long term. And the payments are really quite good now for hedgerows. Wood pasture creation, another one that we do. I think we've built 300 tree cages over the last three years, probably more. That's just last year. So again, something that you can do quite easily. They're just different cages. You can have wooden tree cages, or we have these things called cactus guards, which are wire cages with spikes on, so nothing pushes on them. They don't get pushed over. They have a single tree in. They don't take a lot of land up, so you're not losing pasture. And really good for putting onto places that maybe have some rough ground, or just adding on to established wood pasture that maybe is there already. So increasing that, again, quite another easy way to get trees into the landscape. And what we do is put one standard in the middle and then plant shrub around the outside. And the hope is that not long after, depending on how they get on and where the situation, if they're exposed like that one there, it might take quite a few years before you get to the point of having the scrub and the tree where the cage can come down. But that's always kind of the aim, really. And again, wood pasture creation now is a really good payment through schemes for farmers. The only thing at the moment is that farmers are advised that it's not for sheep grazing at the moment. Though there's a discussion going around about that, whether that's actually just advice or official, should we say. So we're very keen that there should be a sheep pasture option, woodland pasture option. You don't get natural regeneration like you do with cattle, but we're excluding so many farmers and so many farms by not allowing sheep grazing in wood pasture. And it's such a great habitat that could be in a lot of places in the lakes, but we can't put it there because the farmers need the ground for the sheep, understandably. So we're working with different parties to try and arrange and come up with something that would work for wood pasture with sheep. We had this mapping done as well. So this is bracken cover. You see the lake, so it's in the Ullswater catchment quite a lot. So that's dense bracken beds. It's taking over really in lots of places. It does smother out lots of other things. I mean, there's a bit of an argument for it in certain places, but when it gets to on such a scale like this, kind of think that it's probably becoming more detrimental than it is beneficial. And it actually pushes the whole thing about overgrazing on the fells, this kind of bracken pushes sheep onto areas that are grazed, and which then gets even more overgrazed because there's no grazing in amongst the bracken. The sheep won't go in the bracken because you can't walk through it. It's like you go and it's 6 foot tall, you can't walk through it. So it actually it can lead to overgrazing pressures on other areas. But also a great place to plant wood pasture. So if we could plant wood pasture in some of the lower bracken beds, it's a bit of a win-win as well. And eventually bracken doesn't seem to like growing under trees. So, it would take a long time, but we could get to the point where it could help with bracken control. But certainly we just sort of think of aiming wood pasture on the lower bracken beds would be really good as a way of trying to fetch some more biodiversity into those bracken beds. dew ponds and scrapes, another mainstay of what we do. So yeah, lost habitat. Lots of farms used to have ponds, and obviously everything got drained for production. But quite an easy win again to put into wet parts of the farm that aren't productive. Again, the payments are coming on board for these sort of habitats as well. So there's quite a bit of an incentive now for farms to have ponds. And very, very quickly, it's amazing. We've seen ponds within a few weeks that you've dug, and you go back and it's just full, and there's birds sweeping over the insects, and the flowers are coming up, and it's just amazing. They're just, yeah, they're not difficult to make, but they're really productive from a wildlife point of view. That's the bottom one's one we did on the side of Melfell. The other one's in our field, isn't it? And then on farmland in Maddy Teasdale as well. Restoration, rewiggling becks. Dan's expertise really, but yeah, again, another big part of our work. Done quite a lot of projects around the valley. Got some bigger projects in the pipeline, but what we always try and say is that most farms can have a small scale river restoration or rewiggling. All we're doing is putting them back into their natural places so that they act naturally. It doesn't have to be a full-on river restoration where you let it go and it does what it wants. It doesn't have to be that. It can be that if people prefer that. But what we're trying to do is make this fit into a farmed landscape and a working farmed landscape. So we still want that land to be usable by the farmer. But by often doing small improvements, so taking down the embankments so that when it floods out, but it comes back in again. It doesn't sit behind your embankments and just make wet, soggy land. So actually in some places you're it's drier, isn't it, because it drains better. And it's just kind of changing those thought processes. I think of we just need to dig the becks out and build funds, and it's actually just change. It's a gradual change in mindset as well for people. But look what happens when you do. That was a year apart, those two pictures.
Yeah, big old 18 months.
Yeah.
Somewhere like that, 2 years.
And that was on a dairy farm. So that happened on a dairy farm, really productive dairy farm. But again, just for wildlife, but there are payments again coming through for river restorations and flood mitigation projects that are looking quite attractive as well. So hopefully that will provide a bit more incentive as well. But what we do is work with the Environment Agency. So if a farmer says, yeah, we want to reinstate our beck back to where it was, or we want to put in extra channels, and we want some water storage, we generally work with the Environment Agency with that, and they usually can fund it as well. So, but what we try and make sure happens is that the farmer could get a revenue payment in the future. So anything we do, the hedges, the woodland pasture, the river restoration, the flood works, it's all about making sure that it will future-proof the farm as well from a business point of view, not just for wildlife, obviously, and for flood mitigation, but for the farm as well. And I don't think we've messed up yet. Yet. Yeah. Community and volunteers. So it's obviously how we started. We still work closely, local schools, parish council. We have local volunteer groups. We have company volunteer days. So we've had people from Environment Agency, NatWest, Lombard. So we've had people come and work with us who want to do their company days. And we're always really keen for that. And I think it's a really important part of what we do. A community interest company. We're set up to help the community and, obviously the wider community as well. that enjoy this landscape and enjoy coming here. So that's what is a big part of it as well. And we will have some volunteer days coming up this year as well for planting at some point. Yeah, so yeah, we've won a couple of awards. 2022, we won the European River Prize Award. That was part of the river restoration strategy. So it wasn't just us, it was the whole of Cumbria. So it was rivers trusts, national trusts, so I think Environment Agency, all the partners that work together for the partnership. But that was awarded. We were part of that, so that was awarded in 2022. And then last year, in partnership with the National Trust, we did win the UK River Prize for the catchment restoration, which was pretty good. Good to have the recognition, really. It's a lot of, I think, until you get awarded like that and recognised like that, you don't realise how much has gone into what you've done over the years. So, and you can see from the figures, I mean, that's obviously combined figures with the trust, but it's a big impact on the Ullswater Valley, all that restoration work and hedgerow creation. So it's good to see that we've made that impact, and hopefully more, maybe. Yeah, current and future projects. So we currently have some funds from the Species Survival Fund, which is a national project, but from that we are, well, Dan is mink trapping. So we're part of a mink trapping programme. Most people know mink are obviously very destructive, non-native, and have a big impact on our local native wildlife. So we're doing mink trapping in the Ullswater area, and this year Dan's got 22 so far. And it obviously involves going up to various remote places and putting traps to catch the mink. But it's part of a bigger programme throughout Cumbria, but nationally as well, to try and eradicate them. And so the mink that are caught get sent away. Well, they go in the freezer first, and then they get sent away eventually for DNA testing, to know where they're coming from, so they can get a picture of how these mink are coming in and where they're coming from. So there's like the River Trust are doing another area out that people are doing different areas, and so hopefully they'll get a good picture of where they're coming from, and hopefully we can eradicate them. So that's part of the Species Survival Fund, but the Species Survival Fund also is funding hedges and wood pasture as well this year as well. So we've got I think about 3 kilometres of hedges to plant again this year, or to put in. Some lakeshore stuff at the head of the lake here. Yeah, and then we're doing some lakeshore restoration. This is down at Poody Bridge at Ullswater. So the path that goes from Poody Bridge along, it's the Ullswater Way, obviously. A lot of footfall now, big footfall, not just from Ullswater Way, but obviously from the campsites. So it's the main motorway for Waterside and Parkfoot. So lots of footfall, and it's getting really eroded, and it's just not getting a chance to just to restore itself, but to regenerate anything. So we're going to be doing some planting in the area. We're going to plant a big shelter belt behind it as well, because as it keeps washing in, all the soil and gravel keeps washing onto the fields. So we're going to put a shelter belt in, and we're going to do pockets of planting along this lakeshore to try and stabilise the lakeshore as well, and the banking that's getting washed out. So we're going to be planting in there as well. And we're not excluding people completely, but we're having to obviously try and deter people, because we need it to regenerate. Otherwise, that path probably will go in another Desmond. We might lose the whole path. So we need to do something about it. So we've got funding through Farming and Protected Landscapes for that. And then the Borderlands Link programme, it's a new fund. It's between Westmoreland and Furness Council and Northumbria Council, and it's cross borders. That's why it's about trying to find ways of putting nature recovery, how the councils can help fund that and how they can put it into their areas. So we're working with them to try and work up some options for grassland options, hedgerow options, yeah, sheep pasture. So we want to be able to show that you can actually put nature recovery on into farms, but also then that can then possibly be used for BNG, for biodiversity net gain credits. So lots of companies having and developers are having to offset their biodiversity loss. So biodiversity net gain is a way of doing that, and what councils and companies are, well, councils really, but some environment banks and things are trying to do is to create a bank of those credits. So what we're trying to work up is options that farmers could then still farm, obviously, but do it in an environmentally friendly way that then could be used for credits. So it's pretty early days for that, but it's something that's happening and it's going to happen. So we kind of need to get on with it, and it's in the pipeline, so it's coming. So that's that's our kind of winter work, I think. And then next year we've got some river restoration in Martindale, and on and on and on. So yeah, I think that's pretty much. Is there anything else that I've missed that you want to
Do for now.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing. There we go. So I hope that's led on well to explain why we're doing what we're doing and how we've got here, really. Yeah.
Wow. I wonder what your ancestors or predecessors would have thought, what those of you involved in at the moment. My sense is that you're completely at the cutting edge, certainly in this part of England. It's just extraordinary how your interventions have happened at a very crucial time, where government's thinking about these things, with all the pressure groups involved, and somehow you managed to find yourself in exactly the right place and provide a service to everyone, which is world beating. So I take my hat off to you and all your efforts. And I was very interested to hear of your history as well. My younger brother, when he retired, he spent about a year putting together a family tree, and those in a booklet and all these things, and he was involved in trying to find out where everyone was when they're in New Zealand, and they're all over the place. And you seem to have got a lot of excitement from that, and in the voyage of discovery down your family tree.
Yeah.
And it's get the sense from your talk that it's completely changed actually your view of your place in this community and your links. And you just have to look at the slide of where your family has lived and put down their roots. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. I don't know how many families have gone through the same exercise as you have done.
Yeah.
It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, I don't know, and you just don't know. I mean, there's obviously there was lots of families like us at one point, but I just don't think there is the same. We're not. People aren't here anymore. But, yeah.
Well, they say that the average age of a farmer these days is what, 64, 65. So it's tough, to get people back into farming and to make it profitable, viable, whatever, and sustainable is a huge, huge challenge. But obviously, you're winning in one way or the other.
We hope so.
Are there any questions from the floor? We have a lot of people for the Zoomers who can't see the audience. We have a large number of people in the hall. Let's first of all see from here if anyone has any questions. Yes, please. Just to let you know, the Zoomers often have trouble listening to the questions. So we sometimes have to
I'll speak to you.
or you just shout.
You clearly are pioneering in terms of what you're doing in Ullswater, in terms of restoration and biodiversity, etc. There are many valleys in the Lake District which could learn dramatically from your example, because they look like tree planting deserts. When you go there, it's hard to find a single tree being planted. is there anything that you're trying to do to encourage, motivate, work alongside, partner network with people in places like Ullswater, Buttermere, Langdale spring to mind, which when you walk through them, you see where is a tree being planted almost in the last 50 years. Plenty have been cut down for car parks, but or cafes or toilet blocks. But is that part of your brief?
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, we work in partnership with the National Park and National Trust quite closely, really. But it has been spoken about us going to different valleys. Dynamics are very different in every valley. And I think that was the hope that, right from the beginning. I mean, you went to holiday, I think, didn't you? And
Yeah.
and you would just, but ultimately you need someone who drives it from that valley. So us going in there and saying, well, why don't you do, it's great to advise, isn't it? And say, well, this is what we've done, you could do that. But that needs to be driven from somebody in that area, because it needs to be someone that knows, and understands and knows the farmers, knows the landowners. And I think a lot of the other valleys, they have similar. I mean, obviously, National Trust own a lot of properties in a lot of the valleys as well. So they, it's that working relationship that they have as well. I think we absolutely are always open to go and visit in places wherever. We're not just, we have been to other valleys and have been to other areas. And we worked quite closely with West Lakes CIC. So they're a farmer-led CIC as well. And we've worked quite closely with them. And they're making inroads with their farmers, mainly on the commons, but they are making inroads to making work happen. It's tricky, isn't it? Because it is very tricky, because we don't want to, we're not going to, I think that's where we're quite different. We come with a scheme and say, you need to do this on your place. It's farmer led, it's led from the bottom up, and we wouldn't want to change that. So really, I think the direction has to be enabling people to do what we've done in the other valleys, if you know what I mean. And
I was hoping you were finding similar champions in other places and being able to resource and support and encourage each other. But
we absolutely we would. But,
No, I think West Cumbria CIC won't be far behind. They're a few years behind, and to give them their credit, they're doing it in a different way. We didn't realise when we did this that it would sort of expand to become this kind of beast, really. So what they're doing first is they're monitoring what they've got, and then they're starting to sort of work on that, really, which I kind of wish we've done in a way that we didn't expect it to start.
Sorry, the benefit of the Zoomers, what you're saying is there's some hope in one or two places, but there isn't, if you like, a coherent system across the lakes where different values, communities are working together to solve these problems.
We've been into quite a few valleys and offered plenty of support, and people, in giving the ideas, you can't tell anybody what to do, but if they want advice and guidance, then we're quite happy to go there and to do that. Or even we've had quite a few farm groups come here, because that works quite well. So instead of trying to say do that and do that, if someone is interested, say, well, come over, have a look, we'll show you what we've done, and then you can see how it looks on the ground, and then people can say, oh, that maybe works for me, or that not so much so, and they can actually see how it would fit into their farm. That works really well.
I mean, we have I should have said that really. We've hosted farmer groups, haven't we, from like Dartmoor, Shropshire, Norway. So that obviously we're up to that, but and then they go away and then they'll decide what's best for their valley or their place, isn't it? And I think that's how it has to work, really. But I just think making it possible for people to do what we're doing is kind of the most important stage, really, in these places.
Any more questions? Yes, please.
I feel like we've actually, but your family's moved around in this area, and I bet it didn't do it for a lovely romantic reason. It was because there was money forcing them to mine, to shift farm, to move to a different side of farming. And at the moment, you're talking about farmers now doing stuff driven by whatever DEFRA or the Environment Agency, whatever is paying them for. You now big and famous enough to influence the other way to tell DEFRA, talk to DEFRA or the environment agency about what they should be doing?
Yeah, we do. We've got, we've been used as their example of how to do things for quite a while, really, and done videos. You've been in a video, Gary, haven't you, for DEFRA? And they do listen. They do see that it's working, so they do listen. We did meet Danielle Ziegner, who is the DEFRA minister, a couple of weeks ago, and obviously new government, so who knows, but hopefully, seem very keen to actually see this through. But we do get, when we get, like I said, we get contacted from various universities and things like that to say, to see what you're doing, how can we, can you help us or help advise, and that's fine, and we're happy to do that. But they have listened. I think they've been DEFRA actually last couple of years have been listening and seeing, because we're producing the goods. It's happening. It's not talk. We're not writing about it. We're not. It's happening on the ground and it's working. And I think that's what they see. But it is replicating that, isn't it? Then all over the country, which is. But we do. We have contacts. Any
yes. One question on the Zoom. What is the Borderlands Link programme?
I knew someone would ask me that. So it's Borderlands because it's a joint programme funding stream between Northumberland County Council and Westmoreland and Furness County Council. Sorry, we're just a council now, aren't we? We're not a county council. So it's they have, I can't remember what their fund was called. We've given a big pot of money to try and obviously find ways of to do nature recovery in their areas, and they've reached out to groups and organisations that are doing that already to try and help them make that happen, basically. Now the link stands for Local Initiative Nature something capital, nature capital. So that's really where that's from. But it's a joint programme, isn't it? And this is the first stage of it. And so we've got funding just for the year for that. So it will probably carry on, but it depends what we come up with. Does that answer that? Sorry, it's probably not.
Can I ask a question about one of your slides, which is the hedgerow slide, which is fantastic. I don't know where you got the mapping.
All right, yeah.
Have you worked out how much it will cost for the community? I mean, for Ullswater catchment area, for the communities across, the whole of Ullswater. So I'm going to take control of that bit of the hedgerows. I'm going to do this, and within whatever it is, 15, 20 years or something, we're going to totally revolutionise the way in which hedgerows are tackled as an issue. Is that feasible? I mean, I can imagine in my head, writing a concept paper, 1 page, that's all saying, this is the map, this is what needs to happen, these are the people who need to do it, and this is the amount of money we need. Is it?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've kind of got that there, haven't we? But we always say, like, what the biggest barrier for us is funding. If we could fund, we could make that happen. I'm not saying all of them, but, we could all, absolutely, but it's the funding and knowing that we've got secure funding to make that happen. It could easily happen, like you said, we're doing it already on farms, and yes, not every farm is going to want to, have that, new hedgerows, but the majority we probably could make that happen. But and going forward, we know that we could say this is your revenue from your hedgerows as well, because we know how much, how much you could get for that. But really, we also say that we've got more hedgerows that people want to put in than we have funding for. And it's always that, isn't it? And it's just finding these funding streams. But I mean, I think I'm right in saying that. I think we absolutely could easily put
looking at
in
that, isn't it? The link, the natural capital side of things. There's a lot of private money that people are looking to put into there now, whether that's offsetting, what have you, any of that kind of thing from the company. But they are talking on a different level of funding altogether. Really, when we were looking, we brief chat with the Environment Bank. And we were asking them about natural capital and sort of funding wise and how they're sort of looking, and he said, well, their last drawdown was £220 million. So they're talking big sums of money. So something like that in the bigger scheme of things isn't actually that massive.
We're asking for.
No, I don't think it's massive at all. I think, and since all of this could be done by volunteers, effectively, you're paying for the materials, the trees, whatever it is, and negotiating obviously with each of the farmers involved. But for me, it looks completely feasible. Take it by chunks, you know, as they say, how do you eat an elephant in small bites? And that's an elephant. And you just start off from both ends, and I'm just throwing it out as an idea. I'd be interested in getting involved in something like that. It's a great man. And because it's so visual, you know, it gets people and the school kids and the rest of it. You can easily imagine, you know, some Ullswater program which would say, okay, this is the picture as of today. Let's see what it would look like in 5 years if it costs X money.
I think we worked out. I can't remember it all. I think on the Dick catchment, there's about 37 kilometres of overgrown trees. That's a lot of hedges, and that's a lot of trees that would be planted onto that just in one catchment on one type. That's without looking at the fragmented hedgerows. So yeah, there's a lot of potential.
And presumably you could do the same math for becks and for eroded channels.
So we've done so we've got some mapping for the hedgerows, we've got mapping for the bracken, and then we mapped the water flows through the catchment as well. So where to target anywhere for natural flood management, that kind of thing. So
any more questions from the floor here? Any more Zoom questions at one? Just to close.
There's no more Zoom questions.
Oh, no, let's have the
Do
film.
you want to do the film?
Definitely.
We can do the
Is
film.
everyone, there's a
You
little film.
explain what the film's about and then just
You're
synchronise.
ready to go, it's fine. There's a little film that I wasn't meant to play, sorry, but it's what we did for the River Ward. And it's us in the National Trust talking about what we've done. It's 5 minutes. But if you want to watch it.
Can you hang in for that?
yeah.
So we have to synchronise the Zoom film and your thing.
Countdown.
We count down from 3.
Just a second, not yet.
Oh, not yet, no. Oh, that's sorry.
But it's not.
I have to put it on.
Stop this.
Sorry.
Coming, there we go.
Full screen.
Are you all right? And we tied up. 3, 2, 1, bingo.
So, catchment management community interest company started in 2016 after the storm investment floods of 2015. And it started as a small community flood action group and then developed into the CIC, which was formalised in 2018. Well, I think we're very proud of what we've achieved up throughout the catchment. And when we come back to look at work that's maybe a couple of years old, it's incredible to see what wildlife has returned, to see how the trees are growing, to see how it's changed the landscape, but in a good way. But actually, that we're also very proud that the farmers are happy with it and the landowners are happy with what we've done, and that they can see how this is going to benefit their farm and their futures as well.
I think the work that we do is important because we're demonstrating what's possible by working with landowners and farmers. And once you learn how to do that, you then unlock potential of the whole catchment and then working in catchment reach, which is something that people have historically struggled with. I think it's just, I think what we're doing is demonstrating that we're working with partners, we're working with farmers, and that has enabled us to work at a catchment scale.
So in our partnership working with Ullswater CIC and the National Trust in the Ullswater catchment, one of the really good things about it has the way that the projects have evolved throughout river valleys, so that, you know, we're really developing that kind of catchment scale impact on the hydrology and the geomorphology of these river catchments.
Godwellbeck used to run next to the A592, and there was a real risk of the road being undermined or even collapsing. So in 2021, we allowed the beck to flow back through the lowest part of the floodplain, interacting naturally with all of the land around it, creating fantastic habitat, fantastic floodplain wetland, and removing the risk to the road infrastructure. At Hartsop Hall, we've used a different approach to river restoration, where we've had to work sensitively with the farm business there. So we've carried out a constrained restoration where we've moved the flood banks back, but we've actually increased the wetted channel area from just over 1,000 metres squared to 23,000 metres squared. This increase in habitat is so vital for everything that depends on this environment, but it's also providing some flood resilience for our farm tenants.
I think what's happening in this valley with the Ullswater CIC is just really, really exciting. And it's not one farmer, it's not one person, it's a whole group of people. And we're doing things like the ponds behind me, things like the longer break rotational grazing in the background, just giving nature a chance and starting to use natural processes. And it isn't abandoning our culture, our identity, or our need to live in this place. It's just building on that and giving it a sort of really relevant new start. Sort of reinvigoration of it, and I'm really proud of everything that we're doing, that Danny's doing, and that the other farmers in this valley are doing collectively. We're finally making this place better, and it's exciting, and I'm proud to be a small part of it.
Working with Danny and Maddy at Ullswater Catchment Management CIC has allowed us both to achieve a lot more at a scale which we wouldn't have been able to on our own. So we've been able to create a landscape which is more joined up in terms of habitats, which is better for nature and which provides people with more resilience in the face of climate change. Projects like this are so important for local communities in terms of having a resilient landscape around them. So from a flood, a drought and a climate change perspective, this work is vital. But also for our natural world, which we know to be in crisis, this makes a difference. We're committed to continue our work with local farmers and land managers to make Ullswater a better place for people and for nature.
Super. The extraordinary thing is, I haven't seen this scene, but our next talk is going to be given by Becky on the title of, she hasn't told me the exact title, but something like, Has the Wriggle You Put in Godwellbeck Worked? And that is going to take place at Watermill Village Hall on Thursday, November the 7th. So for those here in the hall and for those listening on Zoom, you can see another round of this story with Becky from the National Trust in our next month's last one of this series. It only leaves me now to ask you one question, which is, as you know, we try to raise funds from these talks. There's a little basket over there if anyone would like to contribute to the talk. And also for people on Zoomers, I'll send out a donation link in the next day or so. Who would you, and the system normally is that half of that donation goes to Friends of the Ullswater Way to try to keep these activities going, and half goes to your charity of choice. So who would you like with any contribution to go to?
Saturday school.
Okay, so the Zooms, Patterdale School is the winner. So any donations, please be generous. It's a very good cause. And Maddy has been involved for a long time in supporting the school in various ways. So very happy to do that.
Thank you.
And the second thing is I'd like to ask Gordon, who is our chair, to say a few words, just to give his thanks on your speaking today. Yeah, thank you, Gordon.
Thank you, Maddy. And if I could just ask you to put the, no, the catchment map, can you put the catchment map back up? That one? Yeah. Great. Thank you. Right, well, I'm not going to keep you too long because it's been a fascinating talk. So roots. So you could argue that God shaped the Lake District. So the last ice age finished 12,000 years ago, and that kind of put the shape on our catchment, the Ullswater Valley. Man came along about 7,000 years ago, and we know that from some of the art that they've done, carving into stones, and of course we've got Castlereagh not too far away, and one or two other examples. So they started changing the landscape as it developed from the time of the Ice Age. The Romans came and messed quite a lot of things up, but we won't go into that too much. And then, of course, the Vikings arrived here. But before the Vikings had been the Anglo-Saxons, and we know they were here because they left us their place names. So two of them came up, Askham and Bampton. But here in the Central Lakes, where the terrain gets tougher, then it was the Vikings, and they left us quite a lot of their landscape. And interestingly, the Viking heritage as well, which is coming through, which is a hardy heritage, I'm sure you all agree. So that was really quite interesting. And I'm going to relate back to the map there because we'll come on to that. In your own history, family history, it's interesting. Bits of mine were coming out as well. So my father was born at Rosgill Hall.
Really?
So we'll be afterwards. And my grandmother on my mother's side was a Watson. So and without giving away too many family secrets, she also had a child out of wedlock, but we won't go into that. And then as far as the army training is concerned, they weren't just training up on Askham Fell, they were training in Watermillock as well, because I remember ploughing up many a mortar bomb that had embedded itself into the land, and those that hadn't gone off, so sometimes we just found the tail fins, but other times we found complete 2-inch mortar bombs. And as children, we used to see if we could make them explode, and we'd throw them onto the road to see if we could get them to go off. But there we go. I'm still here. Goodness knows how. So yeah, so one of my favourite authors is a chap called Terry Pratchett. And one of my favourite quotes from him is, if you don't know where you've come from, then you don't know where you're going. And if you don't know where you're going, then you're probably going wrong. And so it's great to have these roots, people going back in time. And that's a fantastic thing to have. So we know why it is the landscape was changed and adapted, how it was changed and adapted. But also to have the skills that we can change and adapt it back. For those of you who are relatively new to the area, then you probably, perhaps before this evening, haven't really appreciated how it is that the landscape is as it is, in terms of the walls, the field patterns, the old houses, and all the graft and hard work that has gone in to making it so, and enhancing the beauty of the mountains, not detracting from it. And also, interestingly, the sacrifices that not just this valley has made, but neighbouring valleys as well. So the people of Mardale, where your family were from, were sacrificed, or their livelihood was sacrificed to provide water for Manchester. Greenside mines, yes, you could argue it provided employment, but it did a lot of environmental damage here, but providing lead and silver for the good of our own economy. So that's quite fascinating. It's good that we see this book here, James, I can't remember if it's that book or the other book, but he talks about his grandfather and how he learnt from his grandfather, the older ways. And when I was taught farming at Newton Rig, nature never had a voice. It never did. In all of the lessons, there was not one class on nature and how important working with nature is to the advancement, not just of farming and agriculture and feeding the country, but also to feeding the mind and for the welfare of all the people who are not lucky enough to be able to live and work and enjoy the land, that they could come out, get some access to it and enjoy that. And that is why working with farmers to improve biodiversity, it's not just good for farming, it's good for the whole nation. That's at least what I believe anyway. I'd like to congratulate you and Danny very much on your awards, well earned. But I want to take you back to that map, because for the first time since man arrived here, however many thousand years ago, in this catchment, we actually have a pair of eyes who are looking right across the whole catchment, all of it. And they're looking at it from a perspective of its sustainability, but how it now moves forward. And I would wager we've never had that in this valley before, where we have two pairs of eyes who are looking right across. And we'll do so for a period, I'd like to think, of 40 or 60 years. And hopefully you're working on succession planning after that. So that finally we can see where we are going, where this valley is going, how things we change today or yesterday or a few years ago will impact in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 100 years' time. And I think for this valley, that will be of immense importance. We don't realize it now, but I'm sure in 50 or 100 years' time, and not just our valley, but other valleys in the Lake District, across Britain and quite possibly right across the world will benefit from that. So you really are trailblazing. And I hope somehow you can franchise yourselves to get that message out and get it spread across. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening. I'd like to thank the Zoomers as well. And I hope you'll join me in giving a much deserved round of applause. Thank you very much.